Okay, I think we'll go get started and anybody else can just join us. We don't want to make everybody wait. So welcome to Detail Roofing Design Roofing Leaks 101. I'm going to pass this off to Kelly, who's going to go through the ins and outs of it all. Go ahead,
Thank you,
Kelly.
Kim. One of the nice things about having to do everything online right now is the fact that we're able to host both of our Ontario and BC customers today. So just want to say welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. Okay, so our goal with this presentation is to give all of you guys the knowledge, understanding, and the tools to tackle roof leaks so that ultimately you can save on costs for interior repairs, keep your residents happy, and limit your stress, which I'm sure any way you're looking to do that is good. So we're going to start off with why leaks happen, go into reporting and diagnosing the leak, the step-by-step investigation process, complications that can arise, controlled water tests, what not to do, and how to prevent leaks. At the end of the presentation, we will be doing a Q&A. However, if throughout the presentation you have a question, please feel free to pose it in the chat and we will get around to it at the end. So for starters, when should you deal with a roof leak? Now, the answer to this is the same. It doesn't matter what time of year. It can be summer, it can be spring, fall, winter. Immediately. As soon as the first signs appear, you want to be addressing that just to mitigate any further damages that can occur. So first signs, of course, include any active water ingress. You know, in an emergency situation, it's pouring in down the walls, through the ceiling. Obviously, you want to address that. Any water droplets, staining, blistering, even dripping sounds can indicate that a leak is occurring because not all leaks can be seen. So eventually it might cause any sort of staining or an active appearance on the ceiling. But you know, if your residents come to you and they say, hey, there's this dripping sound behind the ceiling, you don't always want to write it off as them just sounding crazy because it could be an indication of a leak occurring. So we want to prevent some of these, what can be seen as more minor damages, some staining, some blistering, turning into major damages. Some of these major damages can cause structural damage, and it can also pose health and safety risks to the residents in the unit. So what causes a leak? An aging roof system that is failing is definitely one of the main causes of roof leaks. As you can see here in these two photos, the top left and bottom right, both of these membrane systems are underneath an inverted roof system. So that means the membrane is covered by insulation, filter fabric, and gravel. So all of these damages can't be seen unless you are removing all of that and exposing the roof system. Once on an inverted roof system, once the membrane starts to fail, you're actually going to have the insulation sticking. And in this case, it's coming up to the point where you can see the concrete deck below. So in all of these cases, multiple leaks occurring at these buildings. And in these cases, it is time for replacement. Anyone who's familiar with our roof maintenance and repair proposals is probably familiar with how often we recommend sealing any open or exposed penetrations. And the reason for that is because they are by far one of the leading reasons for interior leaks. So in this case, we have a wall penetration, or two of them here, that are not properly sealed. And when we did a water test, the interior leak actually became active because of the openings here. So we sealed that all up and good to go. Here's a few different examples of penetrations, again, on an inverted roof system here. The high dome damage that's occurring, you're not going to be able to see that unless you're exposing the area. So for this particular investigation, we had to open up a very wide area to be able to investigate all the different penetrations. Pitch pockets or gum pans is just another type of roof flashing that can go around a penetration. This is also a maintenance item. It is something that you need to be renewing the sealant on a regular basis. Otherwise, it's going to get to this point where it's all failing, water is getting in. And this is actually something that was happening throughout the entire roof, not just in the one unit where the leak was occurring. Down here on an SBS roof, you have unsealed base of a B vent, and you can even see that there's some rust occurring underneath there. So sealing penetration is very, very important. Membrane damage is another big one. Now, membrane damage is not necessarily indicative of your roof needing replacement. It could happen just because of natural shifts in the roof and weather fluctuations. Splits and cracks can occur, especially going from winter to spring months. Other things are just having contractors on the roof. They could be putting something down and not realizing that they're actually puncturing the membrane. Single ply roof systems are very susceptible to perforations, which can cause leaks just because they're so easily penetrated. Lack of waterproofing. So anytime that you have any wood, whether it's down this control joint here, just along the siding, on the actual roof surface, putting metal or shingles or vinyl siding over top of that wood, those are not waterproofing agents. They are first line of defense. However, you do need a waterproofing underlayment behind there, because otherwise, if there's any openings, whether it be the seams of the metal flashing, exposed fasteners, if a piece of metal comes loose, if there's any defects in the shingles, water is going to travel behind there, soak into the wood, and then create an interior leak. So waterproofing, very important. Condensation is another one that happens. In this particular case, we have condensation that's occurring in a crawl space that does not have adequate ventilation. This is also something that we commonly see in attics, in bathrooms. With bathrooms, it could be that the resident just needs to turn it on a little more often when they're showering. However, it could be a sign that it's not being properly vented out to the roof. So definitely something that you want to look into. It may not seem as big of an issue, but as you can see here, there's some droplets building up behind the vapor barrier. When all of that was removed, underneath here is just completely soaked, and it's creating this massive spill of water underneath the area. Improper membrane installation. So in all of these cases, you can see there's openings. The membrane is lifting up. You can stick your hand right behind it. There is no membrane system that you should be able to just lift up like that, especially in this case, the stripping or the upturn of the building. It should be going up and over and be properly sealed. In this case, once the metal flashing is removed, it's just wide open, allowing water to get in behind there and create the interior leak. So I know sometimes it is appealing to go with the lowest cost option. However, sometimes, more often than not, this is what you're going to get is poor quality work. So important factors to consider when reporting a leak. This is something that it would be important to ask residents. If you don't get around to it, it is something that we ask when we're doing our investigation. Things like when was a leak first noticed, and just some more information about its activity. Because if it's something that's only happening when there's wind-driven rain, that's important to note. If it's happening only in the days following rain, that could be indication that the leak is traveling and taking some time to get from the point in the roof to the leak inside. If it's happening all the time, even if we've had 2 weeks of sun, no precipitation at all, that could be indication that it's not a roofing issue. It could be related to plumbing, HVAC, a number of different things. How old the roof is and how long the activity is occurring is also very important to note. We actually had somebody recently who sent out a survey to all of their residents at a townhome complex that had questions very similar to these. And it was helpful because some people who may not have reported a leak, maybe they thought it wasn't a big deal or they'd get around to it later. She sent this survey out and there was a number of leaks reported that we were able to investigate and get to the bottom to as soon as possible. So diagnosing the leak. Many condo buildings, or at least here in Toronto, they have inverted roof systems. So again, that's the membrane covered by the insulation, filter fabric, and gravel ballast. So these type of roof systems can make tracing a leak and diagnosing the issue complicated just because you have to uncover certain areas to be able to see what's happening on the membrane. Now, that doesn't mean that other membrane systems that don't have anything covering them are any more clear cut. Basically, completing a thorough leak investigation or a controlled water test is going to be your best option to diagnose the issue and complete the necessary repairs. So this is an overview of our leak investigation process. As you can see just at first glance, it is a very involved process with a lot of different steps. So every single time we start by doing an interior inspection. When we're inside, we will also use a measuring tape to trace out where the reported leak area is in relation to the window, the wall, something like that, so that we have a point of reference when we're on the roof to trace out the exact location and have a starting point on the roof. If we are able to cut the drywall or lift a ceiling tile, that is something that we can do just because there can be helpful signs behind there that can help us further trace the issue. If there's any sort of attic space, crawl space, mechanical room, basically anything between the leak area and the roof. If possible, we always want to access those areas to see if there are any other signs that can help diagnose the issue. On the roof, we trace out the area, complete a membrane inspection, any surrounding penetrations. We will perform cut tests. This is to determine the makeup of the roof system and see if there is any presence of water or moisture beneath. It's also important to note whether or not there's a vapor barrier under the membrane, because that can contribute to traveling water. In the time allotted, we would apply compatible temporary or small repairs, reassemble the roof system where necessary. And of course, while all of this is going on, our technicians are taking detailed photos of all of these steps so that we can provide you with the project summary report outlining all of our findings with any additional corrective repair recommendations. So I just want to go through a few of these steps, not all of them, but investigating behind the ceiling. As you can see, cutting behind the ceiling, you're able to see any additional staining that's happening, if there's any penetrations or piping where the water can be coming from. In this case, when we cut the ceiling, we actually found that there was an active leak coming from the pipe here. So all of this can be very helpful figuring out what the issue is with the leak. Very similar, investigating the attic, just seeing any additional staining that can help us trace the issue. If there is anything that looks like mold, it is also helpful to be able to relay that back to you so that you can have the appropriate remediation specialists look into that. Cut tests, again, very important. So in this case, we had done a cut test right next to where a defect was found, and underneath the membrane, all of the insulation was just soaked right through. Not every single defect that we find might be contributing to the leak. So performing these cut tests helps to confirm that there is water underneath the membrane where the defects were observed. As you can see here, there was a series of cut tests completed. So we have an overview of which areas came back wet and which one was dry, which can help just determine if any of the water is traveling underneath the membrane. So complications. Sometimes there's complications when we're doing the initial investigation, and then there's sometimes complications that can arise that can create more of an issue afterwards. So this can happen when a leak is reoccurring. So some of the things are no defects encountered. In that case, we would likely recommend a controlled water test to try and recreate the leak. Traveling water, again, is a very big one. Multiple contributing defects. So again, this is when we complete an investigation and repair, and then it continues to leak after the fact. Multiple contributing defects can be a result of traveling water. It can be poor or failing membrane systems. It can just be damages present in multiple areas. So in those cases, the investigation does become a bit more of a trial and error, which is very common with tracing leaks. Green roofs and obstructions on the roof are also complications that can arise. So as you can see here in this photo, the leak area that when we traced out was directly above the area was all the way over here. This is one where no defects were observed in this area during the initial investigation, but when we had done some water testing and expanded the area out, there were some defects over here in this area. Failing sealant applied by another contractor, and then cut tests showed that there was water over here traveling down. So The roof deck can be a common cause of water traveling, especially with steel or concrete decks. With the steel decks, we always try to note the direction that it's going. In this case, it's a concrete deck, but if it were steel and if it were traveling along this way, then that would be important to note because it could be traveling along the flutes in the deck. Again, the vapor barrier under the membrane, when we're doing that cut test, it is important to note because the water could be traveling along that vapor barrier and be coming out from up to 100 feet away from where the leak area is inside. Conduits and any internal piping are another factor that could contribute to traveling water. Green roofs can be very complicated just because the actual membrane on the green roof is several layers below where you're actually standing on the roof. So in order to properly investigate that, you can't just do a visual inspection. You would have to actually dig up these areas, take out all the layers to be able to investigate the membrane below. So during a regular investigation, this is something that is very time consuming. And of course, we want to get authorization on before we proceed with that. So it might be something that we have to quote separately or call in real time and get some extended time when we're on site to be able to do a proper, thorough investigation. Obstructions on the roof surface can also complicate the process. So in this case here, the leak is actually defects that we could see through here are happening in behind these stairs. However, the stairs are welded in place and there is no other access point there. So unfortunately, we can see that there's something happening back there, but we can't get to it. In cases like this, we might have another contractor recommended to remove some of the fencing that's in here, the planter that's built in, or have these railings removed so that we can fully investigate everything that's going on. Especially in this case with the paving stones, these ones that aren't bolted in, we could lift those and investigate what's happening. However, we're not going to see the full scope of information and everything that's happening in that area. So controlled water tests. These can be beneficial, again, if no defects were uncovered during the investigation. It can also be if there were a number of defects and we want to pinpoint which defect is contributing to the leak. That could be maybe your board doesn't have the budget to complete all the recommended repairs. So we want to diagnose which ones are currently contributing to the leak and address those to start. So with the controlled water test, we would either flood the area or spray over different points that could be contributing to the leak to try and recreate it and determine which areas require repair. So some things that we would recommend avoiding, as previously stated, holding off on reporting a leak, we do not recommend just because of all of the interior damages that can occur, the health and safety risks that can come up. And if the issue on the roof is not addressed, it could spread and become a larger issue. So you want to be dealing with that as soon as possible. Having a superintendent or general contractor address a roof leak, again, not recommended. Sometimes the supers that we deal with, they've been working at the buildings for, as long as they've been around. They know the building very well. They're very familiar with everything going on. However, at the end of the day, they're not experts. They may not know what it is that they're looking at with the roof membrane. So we would recommend having a roofing contractor be the one to address roof leaks. Band-aid fixes like caulking, concrete, or tarping, those can work in an emergency situation where you're trying to mitigate any further water ingress immediately. However, for the long term, these are not recommended. They're not permanent repairs. Concrete is not compatible with the membrane systems. And tarping, again, that's just sort of a quick fix, not something that you would want to keep in place for a long period of time. Completing interior repairs before confirmed resolution of leak is another big one. Oftentimes we'll have managers wanting to have the interior repairs completed either before we've been on site for the corrective repairs or on the same day. We would always recommend that after the repairs are completed, the area be monitored. And you would want the whatever the weather event that caused the leak in the first place. So if it only happened during wind-driven rain. If it only happened when snow was melting, then you'd want to wait for that to occur again to confirm that the issue has been resolved before spending the money on the interior repairs. So minimizing and preventing leaks. Although there's no way to completely eliminate the presence of leaks, one of the best ways to minimize them is through regular inspections and maintenance. So we do have an annual maintenance program, and when we're out doing our roof inspections, some of the things that we're looking for are drainage issues, penetrations, which we spoke about earlier, any waterproofing concerns or obvious damage, deteriorated sealant. Basically, anything that could contribute to a leak is our main focus when we're doing these assessments. So a few different examples here. At this property, they have these flat roof surfaces in the back of the units. No traffic on these membrane systems. However, it is covering an area of the interior of the home. So we had done an inspection of 42 of these flat roof surfaces and found 16 that either had some deteriorated membrane, maybe some seams were lifting, but we did recommend that they be switched to 2-ply SBS membrane. And when we were doing the work underneath here, it was just completely saturated. The plywood was rotting out, and this had not yet become an interior leak. Had the board not been proactive and gone through with this, it was only a matter of time that this would have seeped through and created an interior issue. So we did the new membrane, and they have had no issues to date. Another thing that we came across during a maintenance scope here is the high dome at the base of this anchor had some damage. So we recommended the replacement, and during the scope of work found that there was actually water underneath. So again, property manager was very proactive there and had that repaired and replaced before it was able to create any interior issues. At townhome complexes with shingled roof systems, this is something that we see quite often, where there are missing shingles. In this case, there was a ridge vent that was missing. Again, because of the lack of waterproofing in this area, if this is left too long, water is just going to get in, seep in through the attic, and create an interior leak. So we got in there, installed the new underlayment, new shingles, and the ridge vent, which was creating an opening in the roof there. Vegetation. Managers often want to have their super deal with it because they think, oh, you know, it's just some debris vegetation, don't need a roofer to do that. However, the roots of the vegetation can actually be penetrating the membrane. In this case, it was going right into the drain. This is what we pulled out of there. And then once it was removed, the drain had actually been damaged from the embedded roots, and there was water present underneath. So ultimately, we ended up doing a replacement there, tying it in with new membrane, again, before it was able to cause an interior leak issue. Drainage can be a concern. Again, anyone familiar with our reports has probably seen us recommending gravel guards if there's gravel on the roof, or just clearing the drains, ensuring that they're free of debris. And this is because if they become blocked with the debris, they can create flooding or water ponding throughout the roof. If the membrane is in good condition, ponding water is not something you need to be too concerned about. However, if there are any openings, then that's just a place for the water to be getting in, traveling down, and creating a leak issue inside. In this particular case, we have the overflow drain here. A lot of times when we're looking at these drains during our maintenance assessments, we always want to check the membrane around, just because that can be splitting or cracking over time. If it wasn't properly installed and roofed in, then there can be openings there. And whether or not it's clogged and creating a flooding issue like this, water can be getting in at those open seams and creating an issue. So we don't want you to take just our word for it. We have some recommendations here from Suprema Canada, a leading membrane manufacturer, and the Canadian Roofing Contractors Association. So from Suprema, they say a routine preventative maintenance program is fundamental to the long-term performance of the waterproofing system of your roof. We also have regular inspections can identify deterioration or defects that may adversely affect the performance of a roofing system. If defects are left unattended, they could lead to water or moisture infiltration and damage to the roofing components or interior of the building. So one thing that we do want to stress is regular inspections and maintenance can minimize and prevent leaks. However, we do not want you to think that we are saying that regular inspections and maintenance eliminates leaks. Unfortunately, nobody out there is going to predict all the leaks that are going to happen in your building, where they're going to come from, and get ahead of them before they happen. But the best chance of preventing and minimizing them is through regular inspections and maintenance. So finally, in both locations, we do have 24/7 emergency service. So these are the numbers and email address to contact if you do have a roof leak occurring. I would recommend, if you have anything during the week in the evening past 5 p.m. or on the weekend, the phone numbers provided are definitely the best to call, just because we have somebody in our office on call. The number goes directly to their cell phone. You're not getting an automated system. You're not being put on hold. You're coming through, you're getting either me, you're getting Kim, Michelle, some of the other people in our office who can help you out directly and immediately. So that is all we have for now. We're going to be taking some questions.
Great, thanks, Kelly. That was very informative. So if you have any questions, you can either unmute yourself to ask or put it in the chat. So we did have one question that was, what is a vapor barrier? Do you want me to answer, Kelly, or would you like to?
I'll let you take that one.
Okay, perfect. So some roofs have a vapor barrier underneath them, as Kelly mentioned, and the water can travel. The simplest way to think about it is a plastic sheet. Plastic sheet, and the water can travel. It's a great system if it works properly, because it keeps the moisture from going into the building. But it can also make it much more difficult to trace leaks. So it really depends on the roof system if you have one or not, but that's why the cut test confirms it.
What's the difference between the vapor barrier and the membrane? It sounds kind of the same to me.
Yes, you're right. They do sound the same. So you'd have the membrane. The membrane is the actual waterproofing. The vapor barrier it helps the system, but you need the membrane. You cannot have the vapor barrier. Not every roof is going to have a vapor barrier. It's just the design, especially if, say, you have an inverted roof or a green roof. You might put a vapor barrier as a layer, but you can't not have the membrane. In my opinion, a vapor barrier isn't that helpful in some situations, so it's not something you need, but you do see it in some roofs.
Does it go above the membrane or below the membrane?
Below. So it would go right above the deck. So it'd be like the roof deck and then the vapor barrier.
Okay. We had an inspection just a couple of weeks ago, and they found lots of places that needed to be caulked, bolts and things like that. But nothing was really mentioned about the membrane itself. I'm wondering, and we've had 2 leaks in the past 2 years. I'm wondering how they inspect the whole membrane when it's all covered with rocks. Is that something you just do when there is an actual leak, or you replace the whole thing every 10 or 20 years or something?
Kelly, do you want to take this one, or do you want me to?
Yeah, so with the no charge assessments that we complete, in that time, we're just doing a visual inspection of the roof. Again, looking for anything that could be a waterproofing concern. However, we do not expose the membrane. Again, as you saw during the process of the leak investigation, exposing the membrane is a very involved process. It's very time consuming. So it's not that we do not do that. It would just be an assessment that we would charge for. It wouldn't be included in the no charge assessment. As for exposing the whole roof, that's not something that we would be able to do, but we could look at certain areas. Or again, if you're having leaks occurring, we would recommend just proceeding with a leak investigation, in which case the area above those 2 units would be exposed and inspected.
Overall health of the membrane, should the whole thing be replaced every once in a while, or do you just fix it when it leaks?
I would say, depending on the roof system, roof membrane, a good roof should last 30 years. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. Some of the roofs last less than 10 years. We're replacing a roof right now that's 7 years old. So
Oh,
you wait until you have some leaks. I've been asked that question a lot. Should you just expose the whole membrane so you can inspect it? I don't think it's worth your money. I think it's better to wait till you have leaks and expose those areas. And then if
uh,
it keeps becoming a constant issue,
right,
then that's when we look to replace it.
right, right. Okay, okay. Thank you. That answers it.
Welcome. So we have a couple of questions in the chat. So the first one is from Grant. Big issue with clogged gutters causing leaks into the units. Is there anything that can be done on the detail work at the edge of the roof to prevent this? Well, actually right now is definitely the time we see these. It's going to depend on each situation, Grant. One thing is maybe installing more drains in the gutters so that if there's only limited drains and they get blocked, the water going over. But if the water's getting into the edge, I think there might be something wrong with the membrane along there, because even if water overflows, it shouldn't be getting into the unit. So if you want to send that address over, we can go take a look at that specific building. The next question is from Colin. What is the benefit of ridge vents along the edges of the roof versus regular venting? So ridge vents, you don't see that often. They're quite a bit more money. They do allow extra venting, but there's a formula on how much venting you need in an attic. So if you have ridge venting, you might just not need as many other vents. Or if you don't have ridge venting, you might need more vents. So most of the time, if a building is built with ridge venting, you kind of keep that going. But if it's not, it wouldn't be something you would look to add. You would just add more vents. And then Siva, sorry if I said that wrong. What is the expected life of a concrete slope roof membrane? So it's going to depend on the roof system. So the concrete deck would be what would be on the bottom, and then you'd have different types of roof membrane above. So say it's a 2-ply SBS system, which Kelly showed some pictures of. If it's installed correctly, I would say 30 years with maintenance. It's a great roof system with proper maintenance. If it's a liquid membrane roof, maybe 10 years. It really varies. Some new developments will put on cheaper roof systems and they don't last as long, but we can definitely take a look at that. We actually we'll be doing a webinar that's on different roof systems later on, and then that can go through that. We'll schedule that. Kelly, do you want to take the next question?
Sorry, what is the next question?
Oh, sorry. What are you required to do for roof inspections and how often?
So roof inspections, we recommend at least once a year. There are some buildings that like to do it twice a year, whether that be spring and fall, whatever the case may be, but at least once a year we do recommend. During the inspections, again, we're looking for anything that could be a waterproofing issue, any damages, anything that's going to require any sort of maintenance. So that is renewing sealants, sealing penetrations, removing any debris or vegetation that could be disrupting the flow of water to the drains, checking the metal flashing to make sure that that's secure and in place so it's not going to fly off and create a pedestrian hazard. Kim, anything else you can think of for what it is we look for?
Well, that's kind of the majority of the items. Every roof's different and you're
Yeah.
going to find different things, but
Yeah.
the biggest thing is to be aware of what's happening on your roof. Even if you're concerned that the council or the board doesn't have a lot of money right now, doing a no-charge assessment doesn't cost anything. And then if you have a critical item, maybe you can find some money somewhere, because it's going to cost way more money to not deal with it and to have a major issue. So just being aware of what's happening. And that kind of ties into the next question, which is during roof maintenance, what is done to prolong the life of the membrane or the roof in general? Well, similar things that Kelly stated. There's a lot of different things. It really depends on the type of membrane. Penetrations and drains, as we talked about, are such a leading cause of leaks that those are a major area for the technician to look at for maintenance. We have some roofs that say they might have 300 vents on them. So you do it in phases to help spread out the cost. You might do 50 or 100 vents every year to reseal them. Even things as simple as debris removal can make a big difference, because you can't, sometimes like some of these roofs have so much moss or so much debris, you can't see what's underneath. So maybe when you remove it, there's a big hole. So some of the things are simple like that. Other things actually are membrane repairs. If you have a gash in the membrane, you need to do an actual patch and repair that. So there's a lot of different items, and that's why we do like to do the roof assessment on each roof, as opposed to just saying, here's a generic scope. This way we can customize it to your building. Appearance to address moss on roofs. In my opinion, I don't think so. We have a lot of people that like the idea of zinc strips. They help because the whole idea of them is when the rain happens, the zinc kind of flows down the roof. But they don't eliminate moss, and they come off really easily because you can only install them kind of at the ridge and without so it doesn't damage your shingles. So there's different ways to do it. If you remove moss every year and do moss control, that's going to help. In Vancouver and BC, we live in a rainforest, so moss is always going to be an issue. Different maintenance helps, or completing maintenance helps reduce it. I think it's better to do another set of roof maintenance and then installing zinc strips. How do you monitor roof uplifting plywood? Well, that should not happen. Your plywood shouldn't be lifting up. That could be a major issue if the plywood deck's lifting. You can normally tell if you're on the roof because you can see it. If it's a flat roof, if it's not an inverted roof, sorry. If it's an inverted roof, you're not gonna be able to see it. If it's a shingle roof, sometimes it's not that common. Most likely on a shingle roof, you'll see it dip more than uplift, but you'll be able to see it, again, roof assessment. But that's a major issue if you do have plywood completely lifting up, because it means something's not secure. Any other questions? Good questions, everybody. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thanks so much for coming. We're always available to answer any of your questions. And if you want to schedule a roof assessment, just let us know the building. There's no charge, and now is a good time to do it before the winter. So thank you, everybody, for coming, and we'll do some more of these. If you have any specific things that you'd love to learn about, just let us know, and we can create a custom presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.